It is now my pleasure to introduce Minerals Technologies team, who will update us on the company's newest technology, Fluorosorb, which removes PFAS from landfills, drinking water, and wastewater, among other sources. Minerals Technologies is a resource and technology company focused on minerals-based products and systems. The 2023 reorganization into two main categories better reflects management internal focus, and we are seeing already the benefits in the margin improvement despite the weak market environment. MTI reports results now in two divisions of similar size: Consumer and Specialties and Engineer Solutions. The latter includes the Environmental and Infrastructure segment, which is the focus of today's event. The company's presenter are the individuals focused on the environmental division, especially for PFAS remediation. As VP of Environmental Products, Mike Kozak is responsible for all the company's global activities in the environmental and infrastructure market. With 2 decades of experience in the water and wastewater treatment field, Barry Shadrix is the global director of CETCO, which is a company water, wastewater, and remediation operations. MTX has 32 million shares, a stock price of $63, a market cap of $2 billion, and net debt of $848 million for an enterprise value of $2.8 billion. Without further ado, I will now let the environmental team talk about the company's success in introducing Fluorosorb as a proven technology to remove PFAS from the environment. Mike? Thanks, Mike.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you for the introduction, Rosemarie. I'm Mike Kozak. I'm the business unit president for environmental and infrastructure with Minerals Technologies, and specifically I run our CETCO business unit. I'd also like to introduce Barry Shadrix. He is our global director for water and remediation and works very closely with me at CETCO. This is our 3rd year presenting at the Gabelli Symposium on PFAS, and so I did want to take a moment to thank Rosemarie and Wayne and the entire Gabelli team for not only sponsoring this event but for including us again. We see a lot of value, and when we went back and looked at our notes from 3 years ago, it's been an interesting ride as the progress that we've made with Fluorosorb has progressed. So before we get started, as a reminder, some of the statements made today during this presentation may constitute forward-looking statements within the meaning of federal securities laws. Please note the cautionary language about forward-looking statements contained in our earnings releases and on these slides. So, before we jump into our discussion about Fluorosorb, I want to take just a moment and talk about our parent company, Minerals Technologies. MTI is a New York-based, publicly traded company. Last year we did $2.1 billion in revenue. We have approximately 4,000 employees working in 34 countries around the globe. And I want to take 1 second and just talk about the 12 R&D centers that you see noted on the slide. This is a significant differentiator of our company. At each of these R&D centers, we have scientists and engineers working to develop products that actually touch every person sitting in this room every day in ways that you wouldn't even imagine. The company is organized around 4 core technologies, serving the household and personal care and specialty additives markets on the consumer and specialty side, and high temperature technologies and environmental infrastructure on the engineered solution side. Today, we're here to talk about environmental and infrastructure, and more specifically, our CETCO business unit and our Fluorosorb product line. CETCO has 4 main product lines. The first is environmental products. We are the world's largest producer of geosynthetic clay liners, serving the municipal solid waste, the mining, and coal combustion byproduct disposal facility markets around the world. We also have a building materials product line where we serve the subsurface concrete active waterproofing market with our sodium bentonite-based active waterproofing products. We're also a major global player in drilling products, both horizontal directional construction drilling as well as oil and gas. And finally, water and remediation, the business that Barry runs. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So first, I want to talk a little bit about market dynamics and what we're seeing in the market. We've had inquiries, we've participated in pilots, we've interacted with governments to have our technology written into legislation as an approved technology for PFAS applications. We have been specified and won projects in the United Kingdom, the US, Canada, Germany, Belgium, France, Sweden, and Japan. This is a global issue. In terms of the regulatory community, obviously we've spent and heard from many of the speakers today about a lot of the changes, some of the delays in the regulatory implementation here in the United States, but we are also seeing other countries begin to catch up, particularly in the EU. We're seeing progress made towards creating the legislative and regulatory drivers that will help create the market. Public interest, litigation continues to be a major driver of our business. When you look at where we've had successes, that's often where there's a very strong public interest and a lot of court cases that have helped drive some of the funding, particularly in wastewater, particularly in drinking water, and some of the in situ projects we've been involved with. So the total economic impact of what we see within the PFAS world is still evolving. One of the previous speakers mentioned the UCMR5 data, and what's interesting is only 60% of U.S. drinking water sources responded to the requests of the EPA in preparing the data for that study. Of those 60%, over 1,500 public water sources within the United States identified that they would not meet the standards. So that's a huge opportunity that we see just in drinking water alone. Further estimates from the EPA peg the market, including capital cost, operating and maintenance, as well as absorbent media cost at $772 million on the low side, going as high as $1.2 billion market size by 2031, and those are annualized costs. So again, a very significant opportunity for our company. So let's move on and talk about the MTI value proposition. So we're unique in that we have world-class mineral reserves coupled with industry-leading technical capabilities, along with decades of experience and know-how in applying these technologies to our mineral reserves to create unique and value-added products that can serve a variety of markets. That's perhaps our biggest value proposition, and one of the themes that I wanted to talk about today is that while Fluorosorb is a new product, we're not a new company. We've used the similar technology with different components to address a whole number of different applications and problems within various product lines. The technology that works in Fluorosorb has been filtering edible oils for many, many decades. The technology that exists in Fluorosorb has also been used in our organoclay and remediation product lines for years to address environmental concerns and be a part of major environmental cleanups. For instance, in very close proximity to where we sit today, our technology was used for the Gowanus Canal project. It was used for the Hudson River cleanup over the last several decades. So we are not a new company. This is just a new product that we've developed to be able to address an emerging contaminant. So one of the questions that we get a lot has to do with our manufacturing readiness and capacity. Where we stand today is that we have existing online manufacturing capacity to address about the demand that we see over the next 5 years. With a very, very minimal capital expenditure, we can expand that capacity tenfold. So we're very comfortable with where we sit right now in terms of our ability to meet the expected market demand. When we talk about versatility in technology, our product is unique in that it can stand alone. If PFAS is your only contaminant of concern, we can help you develop a standalone system that uses Fluorosorb to remove the PFAS. We can also work in conjunction with other technologies. We have real-world applications where we're working with foam fractionation to remove PFAS from landfill leachate. The company is using the foam fractionation system to consolidate the PFAS. Then they're running the fractionate through vessels containing Fluorosorb to adsorb the the PFAS and assist with disposal of the spent media. And then finally, we are also involved in dual media systems. You know, you've heard a lot today about GAC and ion exchange resin, and there are real-world applications where those media are still being used, either using Fluorosorb as a precursor treatment to remove PFAS before it attacks the other media, or as a polishing agent on the backside. So you'll also hear a lot of the case studies that Barry's going to talk about today, talk about our best-in-class efficacy and our total life cycle costs. What started as university studies over the last 3 to 4 years has now turned into real-world data that is verifiable and that we can share to help demonstrate that not only is our product the most efficient adsorptive media available in the market, but when you look at total life cycle cost or total cost of ownership, we believe that we can present some very viable data to show that we represent a significant value to the market. And then finally, the one thing, another message that I want to leave you with today is that we have moved from sort of the novel new technology phase into the fully implemented commercially viable option phase of the product. And we're going to outline for you here in a few minutes a bunch of different real world examples in the different verticals within the PFAS world of where we've demonstrated success. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Barry.
All right, thanks. It's good to be here again today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our technology, and I'm going to start with the mineral. So Fluorosorb, the substrate is bentonite clay that we mine out west. This clay contains montmorillonite platelets. These platelets are 1 nanometer thick and thousands of nanometers long and wide. They have an immense amount of surface area. In fact, if you could take molecular tweezers and pull these platelets apart and lay them side to side and end to end, just 1 teaspoon of material would cover an entire football field. The platelet surface is negatively charged and the edges are positively charged. And so why does that matter? It gives us an amazing foundation to add technology to the product. Our R&D department have developed surface active agents that we can coat these platelets with. If you were to look at these platelets under a microscope, it would look a lot like a deck of playing cards. And the platelets have a natural suspension because of these charges that we call the despacing. And so what happens when the PFAS comes into the system, it will adhere to the platelet edges and surfaces, and then it'll start working its way to in between those structures we call the interspatial galleries, and they'll form hemimicelles, and more PFAS will be allowed to come into the system because these platelets will expand, right? So it's like an expanding house, or crudely put, like putting more meat into the sandwich. So again, why does that matter? Because it gives you a very unique value proposition in both operating efficiency and capacity. So when you compare Fluorosorb to commercially available products like granular activated carbon or ion exchange resin, we typically see in a filtration system that Fluorosorb will last 3 to 5 times longer than a carbon. So if you're changing out that vessel 5 times for carbon, for Fluorosorb you're typically changing it out 1 time. From a capacity standpoint, we have similar capacity to ion exchange resin, but from a cost per unit or per pound basis, we're significantly less expensive. When you couple this with kinetics and footprint, the picture really starts to become clear. What does kinetics mean in this? So kinetics would be how long does the media need to be in contact with that PFAS contaminated water for the PFAS to transfer out of the water and stick to the media or adsorb to the media. So for carbon, you need a minimum of 10 minutes for that to take place. We call that the mass transfer zone. For Fluorosorb, you only need 2 minutes. So if you have a fixed volume of water, that could look like 10 carbon vessels versus 2 Fluorosorb vessels because of that kinetic. So it gives you a reduced capital. So when you combine this higher performance, the lower capital cost and operating cost, you get a lower cost of ownership. Also at MTI, I've mentioned our mining capability and our technology capabilities with our R&D, but we're also a manufacturing company. So we can make Fluorosorb in various sizes, and that gives us a very unique versatility in how it can be deployed in the field. So we can make very powdered versions all the way up to granular. The powder is being used in water pretreatment, subsurface injection. As you go up that gradation, it can be mixed with soil. It can be used to treat drinking water, wastewater. And then this last larger size was developed for surface water plants and their gravity filters. And then lastly, we can needle punch it into a reactive core mat. That's a geosynthetic clay liner. We've been in that industry for years in our landfill lining, and now we can put Fluorosorb inside. So what all does that mean? I'm going to stick with the versatility and deployment. So if you look at this photo, the dark green section represents the PFAS contamination below the surface. You can see that it gets into our drinking water wells on the far left-hand side of the slide. If you have a municipal well extracting PFAS-contaminated water, you can flow it through a filtration vessel filled with Fluorosorb to remove the PFAS. In the middle of the screen, this represents a large water body like a lake, a river, a reservoir that we might be pulling drinking water for surface water. And you can see that the PFAS contamination will work its way up into those sediments at the bottom and can contaminate that water source. We can easily line this with our reactive core mat and cap those sediments to prevent that upwelling. And then on the far side of the slide, this represents in situ remediation. This could be soil mixing, injection into the ground, digging a barrier. This strategy is used often at a contaminated site. So think of an airport, an industrial site, a DoD base, where they have a known contaminant that they don't want to leach off of their site. You can do source control and to keep it out of those sensitive water receptors and out of neighboring wells. So as Mike mentioned, the last couple of years, we've talked about our university studies, how we've developed the product, and now I want to show you some real-world conditions of how this versatility looks like in real life. We'll start with drinking water treatment. As Mike mentioned earlier, based on the monitoring data, there's many utilities that if the regulation was enforced today, they'd not be ready. So as such, we've worked with a lot of engineering firms and utilities globally to give those utilities another option in their piloting so that they can improve their economics and their efficiencies at the plant. In fact, since we've been here last year, we've had 8 full-scale new drinking water installations that are using Fluorosorb. Some examples of these are on the right side of the screen, ranging anywhere from 250,000 gallons per day up to a plant that treats 130 million gallons per day. On the left-hand side of the screen, these represent 17 projects throughout various regions of North America where Fluorosorb has either been specified, already installed, or they're just waiting on the design build of the capital equipment. Our oldest system is 3 years old, so fairly recent. Our latest installation has been in the last 3 months, and we've put in systems for both groundwater and surface water treatment. So going to surface water, I want to touch on this because it is a unique opportunity. When you compare it to groundwater, the co-contaminants are a little different, right? And it's hard. Sometimes things like carbon can get overwhelmed by those organics and break through quickly, rising the economics there. So this is a plant in New Jersey. They treat 130 million gallons per day, and they installed Fluorosorb in just one of their full-scale primary gravity filters, so it didn't require any capital. Small-scale piloting showed that Fluorosorb could be a strong economic choice. So they put in 178 tons of Fluorosorb into just one of those gravity contactors to remove the PFAS. This one's been running just since May of 25. To keep with the theme on versatility and deployment, I wanted to touch on Selfridge Air Force Base in Michigan. This is a soil stabilization. They had high PFAS contamination from the prior use of AFFF. And they used Fluorosorb to deploy across 8 acres and mix with the soil to prevent the leaching into the groundwater. With just a dosage of 0.5% to 1% that was confirmed in the lab, they confirmed they could meet their remedial goals. And it did just that. They did their post-monitoring of PFAS, and it was reduced by 95 to 100%. Moving on to another versatile deployment, this is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The base selected Fluorosorb on 2 of the sites that they deemed most contaminated. One is this groundwater capture trench you'll see in the slide. All the groundwater flows into this trench. It flows downhill to this filtration basin filled with Fluorosorb. And Fluorosorb reduces their batch time from 3 to 4 hours down to 15 minutes. That talks about the fast kinetics that we mentioned earlier. So far, this treatment system has treated over 30 million gallons and is still non-detect and discharging clean water. Since then, they've put in a second system just in May that's already treated over 1 million gallons on the site. And these treatment systems ensure that both their groundwater and their surface water are meeting the MCLs set by the EPA. I will note that once this media becomes spent, it would be replaced and become a recurring revenue for us. Another versatile deployment is our reactive core mat, that needle punch geotextile that I told you. This is at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. They had high PFAS concentrations in their surface water due to contaminated groundwater upwelling. They put a reactive core mat along a stream 400 foot long by 15 foot wide, and they took measurements every quarter over the course of 2 years and saw significantly reduced concentrations, meeting their remedial goals. And that reactive core mat stays in place today and is still removing PFAS. This one is at the Canadian Department of National Defense. We talked about soil just a bit ago, but that was in situ. This one was a little different because they dug out a contaminated site, 22,000 tons of PFAS-impacted soil, mixed it with Fluorosorb, and they put it back in the hole. Then they did their post-monitoring and saw that the PFAS leaching reduced over 2 orders of magnitude in meeting their goals. We had a unique situation on this site because when they dug out the contamination, they had unseasonal rainfall. And before they had amended it, they were concerned that the water washing off the pile would spread PFAS contamination. They asked if there was something they could deploy quickly. We sent them a reactive core mat where they lined this bioswale, and it mitigated the issue. And this also shows that the reactive core mat can be used for emergency response situations. One more with the Canadian Department of National Defense, and still another unique deployment. This was a subsurface injection. So imagine making a slurry of Fluorosorb and putting a rod in the ground and injecting it. They did that in Alberta, Canada, and they saw significant reductions of PFAS, and that was measured without disturbing any of their groundwater flow. Since then, we have had our first injection in the United States just earlier this year. There's a photo of that on the slide, and the second injection is scheduled for October. And finally, I'm going to touch on this last case study. It's not really a versatile in how it was deployed, but the type of water is certainly different. It's a contaminated landfill leachate that was at a site that had over 50,000 parts per trillion. If any of you know much about leachate, we call it a witch's brew. It's a pretty nasty contamination. But they were over 50,000 and needed to be below 20 for 6 PFAS. They piloted Fluorosorb for over a year and showed that they could meet their goals, and it was a strong economic choice. They put in a vessel purification system filled with Fluorosorb to treat over 300,000 gallons per day. And this full-scale system has been running for over 2 years, and the media change-out is about every 4 months. So I hope that I've explained how this versatility and deployment is important, and I'm going to hand it back to Mike just to close us out.
All righty, very quickly, because I want to try to leave some time for questions. Couple of takeaways. Versatility and deployment. Our product has proven results in standalone systems, working in conjunction with other technologies, and in dual media systems. The global footprint. The product's backed by a global company with decades of experience doing business in a global economy, and that gives us a significant advantage. Demonstrated cost effectiveness and the fact that we outperform other solutions. We have verifiable, best-in-class kinetics, efficacy, and the lowest total cost of ownership of any of the competing solutions. Full-scale deployments. As I mentioned earlier, we feel strongly that we've moved from the novel technology phase into the viable commercial option phase, and we look forward to talking to anyone that would like to have further discussions about some opportunities that they may represent. IP protection. Our product is patented. We have a composition of matter patent as well as method of use patents on the product, and we take the protection of our IP very, very seriously. And then finally, our mineral reserves coupled with proprietary technology. That's the basis for our entire minerals technology business. And we feel that the experience and expertise that we have there have helped us and allowed us to develop a unique product with the versatility to influence and have a role in all of the 4 verticals within the PFAS world. And so finally, we've talked today about some real-world applications of the product, but we remain very, very busy with a pipeline of over 250 pilots and studies in all 4 of the verticals that you see on this slide. So with that, any questions?
So I will start with a similar question that I asked about the activated carbon. So while Fluorosorb absorbs more contaminants, can be used for a longer period of time, at some point it is going to be saturated with PFAS. So can you talk about how you remediate that contaminated membrane, let's call it?
Sure.
And what are the potential possibilities in terms of making sure it does not leach again from that?
That's a great question, and I think one of the words that you used at the very end, leaching, is the key to it. Our product is different, and I know Barry talked about some of the electrochemical differentiators with the product, but I'm going to put it in a little bit simpler terms. If you think back to high school chemistry, our product starts with sodium bentonite clay, so you have this free sodium ion floating out there. And when we talk about surface particle modification, in our manufacturing process, what we're doing is taking this mineral, sodium bentonite clay, we're removing that free sodium ion and replacing it with a chemical surface additive that's attracting the PFAS. What happens, and the way that that works, is there's an electrochemical bond between the PFAS compounds and our product. It's not dissimilar to when you hear about stabilized lead in soils that is no longer hazardous, or trivalent chromium that can be stabilized and rendered insoluble. We have significant data and have spent a great deal of time studying the leachability of our product, and the electrochemical bond is very, very strong. We talked last year about the CRADA that we were working with the EPA on, and one of the key elements that they wanted to support us with was demonstrating further the strength of that chemical bond. In the last couple of weeks, we've had gained a significant amount of traction with the EPA and the Office of Land and Emergency Management on that very topic, and they're beginning to understand that, similar to the supply chain imbalance that was mentioned by one of the earlier speakers for granulated activated carbon, there is a serious problem in that the regulations that they've promulgated, if they take the next step and decide that all of this material has to be treated as a hazardous waste and incinerated, there's not enough incinerator capacity to handle it. So they are looking for alternatives and have responded very positively to the leaching data that we've provided. Right now, it's a gray area. There are a couple of states that have regulations related to disposal of PFAS contaminated materials, but largely it's based on the EPA guidance document, and it's up to the individual generator how they handle it. We have had spent media that is incinerated, and we've had spent media that goes to a non-haz landfill. Our goal, and I believe the support that we're receiving from the EPA, is to move towards a designation in the next waste disposal guidance document that would allow for non-leachable, stabilized, contaminated media, of which our product would fall into that category, to be considered non-haz and be eligible for Subtitle C. The EPA recognizes that whole total cost of ownership issue. In order for their regulations to be successful, they can't bankrupt the company trying to address the PFAS issue. So there are some practical, rational, reasonable reasons why they're working very closely with us on that topic.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, we have run out of time. This was very interesting, and we look forward to seeing the progress.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Tony Bancroft and Timothy Winter, CFA, are portfolio managers. Wayne Pinsent, CFA is Director of Research and Research Analyst, and Rosemarie Morbelli, CFA, and Dr. Rebecca Stern, PhD, are Research Analysts at Gabelli Funds. The above webcast is a recording from the 3rd Annual PFAS Symposium which occurred on September 17, 2025. GAMCO is providing these links as a matter of general information. We do not intend for these links to be a complete description of any security or company, nor is it a research report with respect to any of the companies mentioned herein. As of June 30, 2025, affiliates of GAMCO Investors Incorporated beneficially owned 1.1% of Minerals Technologies and less than 1% of all other companies mentioned. The analysts' views are subject to change at any time based on market and other conditions. The information in this posting represents the opinions of the analyst and is not intended to be a forecast of future events, a guarantee of future results, or investment advice. Views expressed are those of the analyst and may differ from those of other GAMCO officers, analysts, other employees, or of the firm as a whole. Because the investment personnel at GAMCO and our affiliates make individual investment decisions with respect to the client accounts that they manage, these accounts may have transactions inconsistent with the information contained in this posting. Certain GAMCO personnel may know the substance of the posting prior to its posting. This webcast is not an offer to sell any security nor is it a solicitation of an offer to buy any security. Stocks are subject to market, economic and business risks that cause their prices to fluctuate. When you sell shares, they may be worth less than what you paid for them. For more information, a prospectus, or summary prospectus, visit our website at www.gabelli.com or call 800 Gabelli 800 422 3554 914 921 5100 fax 914 921 5118 info@gabelli.com.